think we're running audio all right.
To have with us today our amazing Vice President Mike Pence and his wonderful wife Garrett. Michigan gave us Motang.
And you know, when you say per capita, there's many per capita. It's like per capita relative to what? A lot of very bad things are happening in Nicaragua.
Did you hear that? Yeah. It's a dictator. It's a dictator. Compete with it.
Get this chat going. Hey, there we go. Excellent. All right. Fix one thing, and we'll be up in a minute. Let me get started right here. I'm gonna bring up the show. Welcome everybody. How are you? Hi, it's oh wait, I've got to hit the publishing thing and make sure it's up and running, and now we're live. Hi, welcome to the show. It's Hal Sparks Mornings, Megaworldwide. Like, subscribe, give a thumbs up, support the show. Patreon.com/Hal Sparks. Also Venmo, because technically speaking, super chats always welcome, because apparently I work for tips. And since tips aren't going to be taxed at all, I get the greatest out in having to support Trump's tax cut by just being a part of it by accident. That seems to be the theory. I'm Hal Sparks, and I will be Hal Sparksing the rest of the day as we continue to Hal Sparks our way through the future that is Hal Sparks. But let me bring on the show right now our dear friend. Let me see if I can click on the right button. Our dear friend, the Major. Major Ojeda. There we go. Okay, locate that. Not now. Let me go to here. And there he is. Welcome to the show. Coming up right there. That's it. There you go. Excellent. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you this fine morning? Did you watch the debacle last night? I obviously covered it live. Your thoughts? Any rags? Any bones?
I watched part of it, and then I was just like, I just can't. I can't. It's just nothing
right.
but spewing just BS.
Right.
I did. I kind of also just I hate how those become
him,
just versus me versus or us versus them. I tell
right.
you, I wish these Republicans would wake up. I really do. They know that he's lying. They know that he's full of it.
Right. Yeah. I don't. I gotta say, last night you kind of knew what was going to happen. The primary thing they were going to brag about was the numbers at the border, which again are more in it. I have theories that have popped out lately in my own head, in my research behind the scenes of what's going on. And the hole that Donald Trump dug with COVID last time, and with maggots and with RFK Jr., is that the next pandemic, the next awful that shows up, they're going to ignore entirely. And if any country wanted to attack us with a bioweapon, sadly, now's the time, right? Because you can guarantee that a huge group of Americans, mainly the people who voted for Trump, will not mask up and social distance or get vaccinated if there is a vaccine that's available. And there'll be no rush to create one with, where the government supports this, right? None of that we had previous, even as limping as Trump did it in his process, will we have this time around. And over the last, I've been looking at I'm sure you're familiar with avian flu and how much it's driving up the price of eggs and all that kind of stuff. Didn't address any of that shit last night. He said the price of eggs was a disaster yesterday and was like, but none of it about like any of the root cause of it. He wants to believe that that money printer go burr and that's what caused inflation and blah, blah, blah. When in reality, we know it's avian flu and they're not going to prep for it. For a period of like 7 years, every 3 years, it seemed, there was an avian flu outbreak in China that was like, a couple of people have caught it. They died. We are concerned about this, 3 to 5 cases. But it never spread to the United States, and we never really had any deaths. We've had our first death from it, and we've got 67 cases in the country. And never mind the fact that it's spread. It's mostly, it has not gone human to human, thank God, but from animal to human is enough because it's gone from birds to cows, and people have caught it from cows, and it's gone from birds to cats. It wiped out half of a cat sanctuary, a wild cat sanctuary in Seattle, dead. So your indoor, outdoor pets, that's all of the red states. That's our dear friends with their cats and their dogs going in and out of the house all the fucking time. And none of them are going to be fucking prepared. And to me, I feel like half of the stuff about xenophobia and racism we know for the border, right? We're aware of this. This is our first reaction because it's the most overt and obvious. But my biggest concern is that this seems to be their backdoor way of stopping bird flu or infectious disease because they won't do the normal things like vaccinations and protection against it, recognize that measles is a problem. Right now, he's just declaring an emergency because they're worried about diseases coming in, whether it's from China or South America or spreading some way. And so this is their way of, they bullshitted the entire electorate, their entire base into, against vaccines and taking care of themselves. And so now they have to use all these secondary remedies that are going to arguably wreck the economy in the process, because they can't just come out and say, okay, we were wrong. There's a very strong chance that H5N1 it's jumped from animals to humans. If it's going to mammals and it's killing a bunch of cows, humans are kind of next. There might be a strain of this D1.1, which is the one that's around right now that killed the lady in Louisiana, and measles. Like, you got to trust the science on this kind of stuff, but they can't say that anymore. He's literally eliminated that. So they've just got to, this is the back of my brain is just alive with like, oh my God, they can't respond to anything. They're so conspiratorial. They're so convinced that it's all a big plot that none of them can wrap it. Like, they have to be lied to just act normally. That's the current state of affairs, it seems.
And that's sad because, once again, what's going to happen is when people start dropping, and it's probably going to happen, they're going to try to figure out how they can package it in a way that, Joe Biden was the reason. I mean, that's all they got. No matter what happens,
right.
It's the Democrats and Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden just handed Donald Trump one hell of a daggone economy, and he's crashed it in 40 days. But somehow it's Joe Biden's fault. That's how this is going to be. We weren't prepared because Joe Biden didn't prepare us for it. And that's what we're going to hear. And the sad part about it is these Trump-aloons are going to fall for that garbage, and they're going to absolutely make it part of their talking points. And it's going to, wash, rinse, repeat. That's their playbook. Wash, rinse, repeat. It's the same stuff over and over. Just change the names, or just say Biden did it and go with it from there.
Right.
It's sad because once again, what happens if this really starts to get ugly? What happens if we have another COVID situation where we have daggone refrigerator trucks parked outside of hospitals because the morgues are full? I mean, there's a big possibility. And let me tell you something, this is the worst time, to be in a situation like this. Everybody knows that Donald Trump tanked COVID the first time. He tried to monetize it. Look, there's no way that we couldn't say that Donald Trump wouldn't try the exact same thing to monetize it before they even look at doing anything about it, and it's just sad that we are where we are. And once again, I would take Dr. Fauci over RFK Jr. over any situation whatsoever. And now, if we go through one of these disasters, these pandemics with RFK Jr., I mean, wow, this could be really, really bad.
Right. And again, so how do you do this if you've got you've set this up. Nobody trusts the government. They certainly don't trust the federal government. He's undercutting FEMA. He's undercutting HHS and all this. There are only two ways my brain can go in this. One is complete incompetence or a plot, right? And so, and the thing with Trump is that I feel like he's too stupid for it to be a plot. So they're just a bunch of people around him whispering in his ear, trying to get him to act the way they need to. And they're just corralling his behavior by handing him shit to sign and clapping like harbor seals. Last night, he holds up the thing he signed to, to dedicate the name of the park after the girl, the woman's child who died. And he holds it up like he's in the Oval Office. And this speaks to a performative level of his presidency that I think, we come to expect with the kind of reality show background that he has. But at the same time, it seems to be like that's how the people around him satisfy his need to be worthwhile in that situation. And it ain't because of policy. It isn't because he's crafting a fucking budget. It's not, there's no value in what he's doing at all.
The only thing that he gets from this is that his poorly educated base, they believe that it's really sticking it to the libs. Whenever Donald Trump names something, it's sticking it to the libs. That's not accomplishing things. That's not lowering prescription drug costs. That's not lowering the price of gas and groceries. But once again, since Donald Trump knows that he can't accomplish those things, then that's what he does. He names something, and they act like it's like, yay, what a victory. The Gulf of America. Who gives a shit?
Right. Mount McKinley, the same deal. These are all they talk about all this culture war shit and how these aren't the issues the American people really care about and that the left is into identity politics and stuff. What the fuck do you think renaming Mount McKinley is? That's identity politics. What do you think Gulf of America is? That's identity fucking politics. If they talk about gender studies and how the left just focuses on gender and gender studies. He had Matt Walsh there, what is a woman dude, sitting next to Ben Shapiro. They cut to him 3 fucking times in the bandstand, right? They cut to him more than they cut to Elon Musk on Fox. That should tell you something. And you're going to tell us that we're the ones caught up in the culture war? I think we're just defending people who are attacked. And that's the extent of the culture war stuff that most Democrats are focused on. It's just Republicans aren't aware of how often they attack people just because of their race, sex, or their sexual orientation or any of that stuff. Like that, it's so natural. It's as natural as breathing.
Yeah, I will tell you, I'm already seeing some stuff where they're kind of floating about potentially pardoning Derek Chauvin. I mean,
right?
If you really want to take the United States of America off the rails, look, what we are watching is absolute racism. If you don't know that, then you're not a smart person. People that they have gotten rid of. They got rid of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a 4-star general, black man. They got rid of the woman that was on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They just got rid of a 3-star general, Marine general, who is a woman. It's not too hard to see what they're doing. They're purging our military from senior leadership that is of color and is of the female sex. This is not what right looks like. And this is the path that they are willing to take us down. I'm going to tell you, I despise Elon Musk, but I know that there's all these protests outside of these Tesla facilities. Look, I'm just waiting on those to turn violent. If we keep going down this path, that's what's going to happen. And at the end of the day, I don't care because you know what? Elon Musk don't care about none of us. Elon Musk is just. He is throwing so many Americans into turmoil. When people are losing their jobs, they attack the Veterans Administration. When you kill the very program that places veterans on a phone to be able to help other veterans that are struggling with potential suicide, and you kill that program, you're not lowering the number of suicides from 22 a day to 0. You're increasing it from 22 to 50, and they don't care. by getting rid of 6,000 workers working at the Veterans Administration, that makes it harder for me and any other veteran out there to be able to get care in the community, to be able to get our appointments that we need, dental appointments and things like that. I mean, what they are doing is absolutely a travesty to our veterans. And the bad part about it is that, once again, if you do not remove yourself from the Fox, the OAN, and the Newsmax, then you don't know what the hell's happening. And I'm going to tell you, that's one of the things. If I am successful when I run in this congressional run, when
you're successful,
that's what I'm talking about. One of the first things I plan to do is push legislation to try to bring back a fairness doctrine. And I mean, sit down and really go over all the rules and regulations of what we can allow, and absolutely make it illegal for these places to be able to spew the lies that they spew. Fox News paid $787 million because they lied. And the bad part about it is Fox News isn't telling everybody, sorry, people, we paid $787 million because we lost. Million, by the way. Million because we lost. They're not saying that. And their followers don't know any better. And they think that's all a bunch of lies, but it wasn't a lie. So, I mean, it just amazes me how so many people have fallen for this buffoon who, by the way, we know told over 30,000 verified lies in his last term. And now he's on his way to double that.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. It seems like to me, and I'm sure you've seen this a bit too, it seems like they're keeping him busy. I am struck by the fact that in his brag about we've done more in 40 days than anybody, he just signed a shit ton of executive orders. And he has no idea that every president comes in and half of what they do is not signing their own executive orders, but eliminating the executive orders of the last presidency anyway. So you've got if you got 100 that you're going to put in your presidency and 100 you put it, you get rid of from the last president. You're basically doing your filing. You just do this shitty kind of perfunctory bureaucratic work that every president does when they've got this much of the budget they can actually do something with. So they come in and they do that. Every president does it. The only difference is Democrats and other thinking Republicans, it would seem, pace out their own executive orders based on the understanding that it affects markets, that it affects the safety and lives of Americans, that you want to test these things and see if they're as popular as you think they are. But since he ran on all these grudges and all this shit, basically they're just coming in, anything Biden did bad, and he's just signing pages of Project 2025. That's all this is. They're just printing them out. Here's an executive order. Here's an executive order. He signed one bill, the Lake and Riley Act, into law. That was the Democrat-Republican bill that was shown around last year. The only difference was they plastered her name on it to get the Republican holdouts on board so they could pass it. That was all. The addition of her name was not to shame Democrats into voting for it. It was to shame Republicans into voting for it. It's the only thing he signed as a bill. And they don't even have a fucking budget. And they got, 10 days? 8 days now? Whatever. 8 days now. Till the government shuts down. And they don't have a budget at all. The House and the Senate are fighting over their bills.
And that's the way it should be.
Right.
But once, I mean, you're absolutely spot on. And once again, are they going to actually pass the budget? I mean, if it does, it's absolutely going to be very, very painful for a lot of people in this country. Right. And that's the fact. And also remember that a lot of those executive orders that Donald Trump signed, they're being challenged in the courts. And a lot of them are already getting tossed out. It's that's like exactly Donald Trump he's throwing shit on a wall and seeing what sticks. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course he's going to, make it out to be that he is the most popular and because that's who he is. I want to tell you that yesterday, my opponent, Richard Hudson, is the Republican that told all of the other Republicans, cancel your town halls. So what they're saying is we don't want you to stand in front of the people because it's a really bad look because the people have caught us doing the garbage that they're doing by screwing over the veterans and screwing over the elderly and screwing over the poor and the middle class. And, I mean, once again, cowards. I mean, I'm going to do a commercial saying, where are you at, Richard Hudson? I mean,
Yeah.
you literally, that's your plan. Instead of solving problems, instead of working for the people, you basically say, let's just ignore them and keep doing what we're doing. And I hope that people remember all this stuff, because there is going to come a day, and it will be during Donald Trump's second term. There is going to come a day when every single body wakes up and realizes that this guy is not the way to go. And let me tell you something. Don't you dare allow these Republicans at the last minute to kind of change the scenario and act like they're the heroes. The pain that we are going to feel over the next 4 years is directly relatable to the daggone Republicans in Congress. And that is an absolute fact. And people need to understand that, because we are going to go down that path.
Yeah, I've been saying there are ramifications. I mean, you can look at the tariffs went into effect. He punted them a month. That made the stock market dip. You could argue insider trading. I would argue that there's an element of like them forcing a dip. His rich friends buy the dip. He undoes the things, and you can make so much money. You could make billions of dollars if you know when the dip is coming and you know when it ends. That piece of information, you don't even have to know which stocks, because overall the trend will be such that it will go in those directions. Now, there's always been the issue with insider trading, the potential for it in the House and the Senate, because you know what contracts might go out. Halliburton being one of them, right? Where you don't actually have to, if I whisper in your ear, go, hey, buy this, they're going to get the contract. We passed it out of committee. It's going to get a vote, or it's in the must pass bill. So it's definitely happening. And you tell somebody and they're able to buy in, and they slow walk it for a couple of weeks. They're not buying a big chunk so everybody gets wise. They buy, they start incrementally. Hey, it looks good. They might get the contract. You can even bullshit your way if you ever get caught. They can buy a little bit until they get a lot, and then it's worth a ton, and then they can sell a chunk of it and take the profits and whatever. This is different, because this is rigging the actual system to behave the way you want. It's not about like, I'm going to make sure they get this contract, or this contract is happening, therefore whisper campaign. But I can wreck the economy, and I can let it heal itself because of the vast amount of money that's involved in it. It will recover on an arc as long as I remove this barrier. So if you know this, you could just artificially create the barrier, artificially remove the barrier, tell your friends when you're going to do it by the hour or the date, and it becomes a meme coin. Like the meme coin things that Trump was doing. Like there are a bunch of people that were sniping, quote unquote, the meme coin, right? That's where I'm going to release a meme coin. You and I both know it, but I've told you that we're saying, okay, it's going to be next week sometime. This meme coin's going to last. But I tell you, 11:59 and 35 seconds on Tuesday is when it officially launches. Everybody else is waiting by their keyboard like somebody on eBay trying to, win a piece of fucking Marvel memorabilia, but you know the exact time it starts. And so what you do is you set up bots and computer programs to the second that second comes up, your machine starts buying. You snipe those. You buy them at a lower price. Nobody else even has a fucking chance. And then as people dive into the market, you could sell chunks of it and build and make millions of dollars on the backs of these suckers. That's what he's doing. That's what he's doing. They know this. And whether he knows it is the question. Bessent sure as fuck knows. My question is he, because he seems so fucking dumb. Dumber than last time. And he was always dumb anyways. But I got to tell you, it looks like Musk and all these guys are just whispering in his ear. They're going to love you. Just sign this. And it's all about his ego and what he thinks is going to happen. We're going to make so much fucking money off this. And don't worry about it, boss. And I don't think he has any concept of the reality.
And the bad part about it is that he's fleecing his own flock.
Right.
I mean, these people are just dumping their money, and when they lose everything, are they going to wake up? Because I mean, it's like you've never seen somebody that preys on their own people more than Donald Trump. And I got up this morning and of course, I look through my social media and I see these people, best State of the Union I've ever heard.
Right.
And I'm thinking, and of course, how dare the Democrats? I remember when Lauren Boebert and Marcia Trainwreck Green were just cackling, at the top of their voices.
Oh, yeah.
They never got escorted out. But I mean, it's just it's so sad. It's like when you have somebody that you know that is on the wrong path, and there's not a damn thing that you can tell them to get them off of that path before it is catastrophic. And
right.
It's almost like drug addiction. These people are addicted to Donald Trump, and their lives have been consumed for the past literally almost 10 years. Their lives have been consumed that Donald Trump is the hero of the common man, and that Donald Trump is one of them. And, there are so many of them that have already fallen off the cliff with this. But when are they going to wake up? And how on earth can somebody as morally bankrupt still hold so much from these people and still have them absolutely loving them? I come from southern West Virginia. West Virginia was underwater for 2 solid weeks. It took 2 weeks for Donald Trump to declare that area a daggone disaster zone.
Area, right.
For 2 weeks, those people, instead of having any assistance whatsoever from FEMA or anything like that, they had to go on their own. They had to help clean each other's houses out and get rid of the flood and all that stuff. Until the president signs a declaration of a disaster zone, you don't get to file anything with FEMA. And those people in West Virginia were absolutely just like, I cannot believe this. But once again, how soon they forget. Because a lot of the people from West Virginia, southern West Virginia, that got flooded out, today, Donald Trump's the greatest president in the world.
Right.
You don't say nothing about the 2 weeks your butt was daggone sleeping on a daggone raft because y'all was underwater. I don't understand it.
Well, and again, and many of them still are. Those aren't the same people, right? We know this. And if they're people at all, never mind the fact that X and all that kind of stuff and the self-selecting groups that Newsmax and Fox interview, RSBN, Brian, what's his name? The guy who bumps uglies with Marjorie Taylor Greene, which would include accidentally shouldering her in an elevator. But that said, these are different human beings if they are not bots to start with, because we know there is a concerted campaign by Elon Musk and others to artificially inflate his poll numbers for him. He seems to think, by the way, that he has some of the best numbers that he's ever had and what have you. When his aggregate number, he's underwater right now, and it's not going up. It's going down. It is. All presidents have that issue when reality sets in. His was already under, it was like 47%, and it's headed downward. There's no version of this where I'm sure MAGA will give him a momentary bump if they think he's solve the next Lake and Riley moment, or they've arrested somebody, or they get credit for something like that. But if he goes through with any of the shit he's talking about, including the tariffs, once they start to kick in, that's that. The math on this is not going to change. As much as they want to bullshit their way through it, the math is not going to change. These tariffs are going to drive prices up right when prices are already high. And his RFK thinking the cure for vitamin A will solve the avian flu issue, not vaccines, is not going to help the price of eggs. It's not going to help the price of dairy. Oh, for fuck's sake. Okay. So one of the reasons why we're concerned about H5N1 and the D11 strain is because it's the one that went from birds to cattle. And then the people that have caught it, most of them have caught it from milking cows. In the process, they caught it directly from the cattle themselves. These are farm hands, people who work there, and they caught it milking cows. The thing, I don't know that people can wrap their head around is that it's the raw milk that is how they catch it. They're getting it on their hands, touching their eyes. Their exposure to unpasteurized milk was exact, because they're not touching the cow's head is in a fucking holder while it's being milked, so they're not present there when they're attaching these things. They're not even doing it for a long time. It's not like they're sitting in a fucking barn doing it in a pail like it's 1953. It's a machine, so they're not touching the cow's eyes and nose and its mouth in this process. They're touching the teats as they put this shit on, and contact with raw milk is enough for these people to have caught it. 67 cases. right as RFK Jr.'s like, we're going to protect your raw milk. And what do the fucking maggots say about if you're concerned about H5N1 or you're concerned about disease from raw milk, boil it. Well, motherfucker, what do you think pasteurizing is? What do you think it is? What are you talking about? It's amazing to me. Like, they have to be, and that just points out to me, like, what are our choices? Are the only way to save these people to lie to them? Because I'm not willing to do it. I think you and I speak so frankly. I don't even know how to play along with how much these fuckers need to be bullshitted. It is stunning.
Let me tell you, I am, sitting here and I'm thinking, we are going to have that moment where a lot of these people finally do wake up. And the bad part about it is they're going to wake up when all of us are in a world of hurt.
Right.
They don't understand. Donald Trump can talk tariffs all he wants. Get ready, because your prices on everything from automobiles to fruits and vegetables to medicines to you name it, certain items that we rely on China and Canada for, Mexico for, it's going to hit Americans in the pocket. And let me tell you something. We already know that we already know that Donald Trump will automatically, through whatever he can do to try to thread that needle, to say it was all Joe Biden's fault. But once again, besides the fact that the grocery prices, the price for food, the price for gas is about to skyrocket, we're also looking at another daggone pandemic that literally could take a lot of people out in a very short period of time. And once again, are you gonna try to blame that too on Joe Biden? Because I think what's going to happen is the next person that comes in is going to have to do exactly what Joe Biden did. When Donald Trump is gone, and I don't know what, but I tell you, I hope that this presidency, I believe that when the people finally do wake up, they're going to be really, really pissed. And I'm hoping that doesn't mean if they get rid of Donald Trump, we get J.D. Vance, because J.D. Vance is absolutely just a worm. But whoever takes over next that has a sane mind is going to have to basically rebuild the systems that Donald Trump and Elon Musk and them have killed. I mean, I keep telling people, look, you know what? Hang in there, Democrats, hang in there, because no matter what they do to us, it's going to motivate everybody, to include Republicans that are going to wake up, and Republicans are waking up. It's just slow, but they're waking up. Is that we're going to have to rebuild. We're going to have to, if I am successful and they've killed Medicare and Medicaid, then it's up to me to go to Washington, D.C. and say, it's time for us to bring back Medicare and Medicaid. If you kill Social Security, I'm going to try to bring back Social Security, except I'm going to do it in a way that a lot of these billionaires ain't going to like. And my thing is it's time for us to tax. If they're going to be the way that they are, and that's who they are robbing the American taxpayer blind, and they got a smile on their face. So therefore, I think that it's only fair that when we take back over, and I don't want to hear not one single friggin' Democrat give any friggin' daggone quarter for these assholes. Every single one of them needs to be taxed at 85 to 95 or 90%. Every single billionaire needs to be taxed just like that, because this is absolute friggin' garbage. And once again, they're raking it in hand over fist, and they like it that way. And Donald Trump wants to make it even worse for us and better for them. So, if I am successful, and I'm going to be successful, I'm going to go to Washington, D.C., and I'm going to try to fix a lot of this stuff, and I'm going to become a thorn in a lot of people's sides.
Well, I would argue that Democrats have a lot of weight they can throw around, in that if you guys wreck Medicare and Medicaid the way it looks like Trump wants to, then you know what's going to happen. When the backlash happens, and it will happen, Democrats are going to step in and make an even more resoundingly strong version of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. That those systems might be the old, patchwork version of things, and we're just going to come up with a major overhaul of the ACA with a Medicare and Medicaid provision, a single payer system that that allows you to buy in, and for state healthcare systems like Massachusetts and Washington State, for Americans to buy into those nonprofit systems that will benefit those states, and you can buy them across state lines. I've talked about this for a long fucking time. That if you put it in a position where you can get so far out over your skis that the backlash is actually worse than what you were trying to stop in the first place. And that's where Republicans, I feel like they're going to end up. And maybe, there's been talk for years about UBI, for example. And UBI isn't going to work because universal isn't necessary for anybody who's making over whatever fucking $2 million a year. They don't need an extra grand a month play money to screw with the stock market. That's not how it works. It's got to be welfare and means based below a certain point, an obvious point. And it wouldn't even be a diversion of wealth from something else. It would be from the actual industry of the country, which is protected by your tax dollars, the intellectual property. Just that alone, just the intellectual property, the cost of protecting intellectual property for all these corporations worldwide. It's not a fee they pay for. They have lawyers and that kind of stuff that they fight it on, but it's the strength of the U.S. government and the taxpayer and the system that we put up that ultimately protects their rights to their patents and all that kind of stuff. That's the federal government. You dismantle that shit, then it's a free-for-all, and they know it, and they rely on it. It's, again, it's like Trump's complaints from, airlines. He talks about if you land in Europe, they charge you all this money. He's not talking to American Airlines or Delta. He's talking to his private plane friends. That's who's bitching to him. He wants you to think it's because American Airlines is getting jacked up by landing in France. Nope. It's his rich ass friends and their 727s or their DC-9s or whatever they fly, where they bring over entire business groups to the WEF meetings or the G7 meetings to take over an entire fucking city block while that shit's happening every year. That's what they're talking about. They're getting charged as a private plane because they don't mitigate any of their carbon stuff. So Europe is doing those kind of things. And they're allowed. You can't force them to do it. And that's what he's bitching about. It's, again, last night, the amount of just lazy lies he was throwing around. And also this, Summer, my girlfriend, she watched it and her response was that if you didn't know he was lying, a lot of the MAGA crowd, is going to see what, he did and go, it was cohesive, and because it's in a fucking teleprompter, and he went off it a lot less than he had previously, right? He veered off, and because Democrats veered off, it seemed like he was veering off in response to what they were doing instead of himself. But ultimately, none of it's going to matter because everything he's presenting is going to cost the consumer more, period, end of story. The tariffs are going to cost you more. Whatever his reasoning is, it doesn't matter. It is going to cost more. And eventually, it's like the government shutdown. We always think, okay, the government shuts down for 5 days, 7 days, and everybody starts getting nervous, and then it undoes itself, and everybody goes back to normal because they realize the threat. It starts getting dangerous, and the business leaders call up the White House and go, knock it the fuck off, or call the House and Senate and say, knock it the fuck off. The same thing is going to be true of these tariffs. The question is, will he listen when they call Bessent and they tell him this?
Well, I'm like, a lot of people, it's going to come pretty rapidly, I believe,
right.
And a lot of these people are going to start really feeling the pain. When you kill Medicaid, Medicare, and you have parents that are in, some of these homes, understand that that's what pays their stay. So a lot of people are going to get a rude awakening when they get that phone call that says, hey, you need to come here at this home, and you need to pick up your mother because the money is no longer coming. And if you can't provide it, we're going to wheel her out to the parking lot. You got to take her home. And a lot of these people are going to start realizing, that the stuff that Donald Trump is doing is going to hurt them in the pocket. These tariffs and stuff. Get ready. A lot of poor people. And I'm going to tell you, Donald Trump preyed on the poor people, the poor and the poorly educated. And those are the ones that voted for him in lockstep. But make no mistake about it. Now you're going to go after food stamps. You're going to go after SNAP benefits. You're going after the poor, and you don't even realize it. But that red state of West Virginia, of Kentucky, of Tennessee, of Alabama, of Mississippi, those are very, very poor states. And they're loaded with Trump-aloons because Donald Trump makes him think that no matter what it is, have no fear, it's going to get great. and it is yet to get great, and it's only going to get worse in a very, very quick moment.
Such an excellent point. And the one death we've had from measles so far, a child in Texas. The one death we've had from H5N1 in the United States, a woman in Louisiana. This isn't California, New York. This is the highly dense, metropolis, Democrat-run cities. This isn't downtown fucking Chicago. It's all red states. And the same thing is true. We're seeing these people like flip out about, are their SNAP benefits going to get cut off? Yes, they are. Because Elon Musk and all of his bullshit absolutely hates white trash. He hates any other color. Obviously it's the lowest level, but there's a volume of them and they're a drag on the system. If you want to look at who costs the federal government the most money, it's poor white trash. That's what he's going to, by the numbers. That's the conclusion. And there's no way you live in first principles with your little Doge thing and letting AI decide who lives and who dies, and you don't come to the same conclusion. Fucking white trash in West Virginia and Indiana and all these places they got to go. That's where it's going to come to.
I'm looking because Elon Musk, I don't know. I saw something, but I can't find it.
Right.
Something about him speaking about poor people in America, and it wasn't in a positive way.
Right.
You're right. These people don't care about poor people.
No.
We've heard Elon Musk talk about, almost like, I think he said that we needed some type of a mass extinction, and I think what he's talking about is, if we keep going the way we're going, if we don't find out how we can expand to other places, we may run out of food in this country. On the planet.
So we know we've talked a lot about how Elon Musk has outsized control over Donald Trump, and it was clear that he was like sitting in the gallery like the king as his duly designated representative spouts off a bunch of populist crap at the hordes to draw attention away from the king. Kind of like Mel Brooks in History of the World Part 1. Where he's the piss boy. Trump is the piss boy. They put the fucking mole on his face and put him in the king's outfit so the king can escape and everybody else can eventually come for him. But let's not for a second forget the outsized impact that Joe Rogan has had on this entire, including informing Elon Musk's priorities and what they think is kind of how they take the rectal temperature of MAGA in the country was through Joe Rogan. And what did Joe Rogan say? I want to say, he's been saying it for years, but there was a period where it was part of his however shitty stand-up, but also in his generalized conversation points, that the stupid are outbreeding the smart. That's where his like Joe Rogan Experience, shaved monkey storyline, that most people are just stupid, and he's different because he's, I'm just this dumb pothead, which he doesn't believe. He's trying to associate himself with what he thinks his audience is. He thinks his audience are dumb potheads. That's what he thinks of them. And so he aligns himself with them artificially while he lives in a fucking gated community outside Austin, Texas now, after he lived in a gated community in Agora Hills. When I went and did his show years ago, that's where he lived. I had to leave my motorcycle at the fucking gate because there's no motorcycles allowed in the area he lives in because the noise bothers the rich people. Fuck off with this. I'm a shaved monkey, stupid pothead. But his whole storyline, and believe me when I say, like Musk and Don Jr. and all these fuckheads all think this, that the dumb people in the world are outbreeding the smart people. And there's only one answer. The smart people need to have a shit ton of kids. Look at Elon Musk and his laying his seed everywhere idea.
One a week.
Right. And this culling of the herd that has got to be part and parcel to putting somebody like RFK Jr. in charge of HHS. If you do something like that, what you're saying is, look, people are going to fucking die. You can't save everybody. Fuck them. You know what I mean? Like, you can't. We're trying to keep too many people alive. We're keeping all these broken and weak people. We're letting them stay alive, and we shouldn't. That's it. That's what you think if you put somebody like RFK Jr. in charge of HHS. It isn't that he's right about raw milk and autism. You're like, don't worry. This guy will let people die and will lay it on his shoulders because he's too fucking stupid. You have to believe that.
Yeah, I mean, it's going. I think it's going to happen.
Right.
I think
I agree.
more it's going to be sooner than later.
Right.
And I'm just hoping that enough people, wake up and realize, I mean,
Yes.
as long as Donald Trump is able to continue to poison the minds of these poorly educated people, it's going to be a problem. And these are
Right.
people, I mean, I worry. I worry because I think that it wouldn't bother Donald Trump or anybody else. Here's the thing: when you become the president, everybody is your constituent. That is understanded. That is understood by every single person who's ever occupied the chair, except Donald Trump. Donald Trump still is thunder. Donald Trump is still just he doesn't get it. He doesn't realize that he is still just attacking blatantly every Democrat. Donald Trump has cut this country in half. And I just it kills me that we are here because we shouldn't be here. And but once again, I hate to say this, but I'm like, you know what? If it's going to get painful and it's going to get painful quick, then let's get it on. Let's do this because I'm hoping that is what's going to wake a lot of these people up. Because if we don't, I mean, every single day we're moving further and further towards a dictatorship, and that scares the hell out of me.
Yeah. See, again, my biggest concern is ultimately not Trump. I think they're bum rushing him through signing a bunch of shit because I don't think they expect him to last. Either they're going to throw him to the wolves or he's going to keel over. And part of this you can see in just his kind of like the timing of what he's doing. I'm more worried about like kind of what they believe is the oligarchical class that will take over, and then they'll make JD Vance their machine or whatever. Well, the problem they have is Vance is not the charismatic cult leader that Trump is. Once Trump is gone, there is nobody to backfill that. There's no one waiting in the wings. And MAGA knows this. That's why they talk about him living forever, because if he doesn't, they're fucked, right? So my concern is that damage, that get it on kind of attitude, unfortunately, is if it happens, the danger is so acute, especially from infectious disease and food safety and any myriad of Trump kind of jump-starting international terror with his Gaza remarks and shit like that there's going to be a ramification, and all of the people involved in that will have learned from the last one. They'll have learned from COVID and how nobody's going to react the way they should when there's an infectious disease. They're going to learn from 9/11 and all these other things, and that one big thing doesn't do it. You need 10 smaller things that are close to that level, that are shocking and scary, but make you feel like you're surrounded. They're going to learn those lessons. And by then, that whole never let a crisis go to waste, the right wing will seize on that the way they did with the Patriot Act, and they will use these things to tighten down even more. I think our responsibility, as especially when it comes to Democrats, is there's got to, every time he does some sort of fuck around, and we know where it's headed. This train has left the station. We know it's going to collide with a wall or another train. Democrats need to come out and put a fucking flag in the ground going, tariffs are going to raise prices, period. Now, and check back with me in a couple months or whatever. And on every one of these things, women are going to die because of the limitations on abortion access. Flag in the ground. And then when the time comes for that moment you're talking about, where people start to wake up, Democrats, the only job is to point to the flags and go, that's what we told you, that's what we're trying to fix, and that's what we're gonna fix. Vote for us and move forward and stop fucking around with this nonsense. That's the only option we have in a democratic society. There's not going to be another dictator that coups him and fills the gap and is suddenly a benevolent Shah. It's not happening. It's us. And so our primary thing has to be, we need every voter we have to vote Democrat. Anybody that's ever voted Democrat has to vote Democrat for the next decade. And nobody fucks around with tap dancing around any of this.
We've got to get the vote out. I mean, more people chose not to vote in this last election than voted for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. So,
that's right.
That's just, we have to do better.
Agreed.
I thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, ladies and gentlemen, in case you don't know officially, the Major is running for Congress. This is his Act Blue website. You can we'll put the link in the chat room so everybody has it. We do it every time we're on here, but you can go to turnleftpack.org, and I'm sure there's a link there as well.
Actually, Ojeda for NC.com. That'll take you to my new page.
OjedaforNC.com for North Carolina. Friggin' like so necessary. And like I said, I'm not messing around with any of this stuff. I don't want to hear. I have zero complaints about Democrats right now. Zero. Even the ones that aren't fully on the boat with us and or seem to be trying a different tack. Like I don't want to hear shit about Fetterman. I don't want to hear shit about anybody else because everybody's trying their pathway to. We all know what their values are. They're all just trying to shape it back. And I would rather in a dangerous situation, somebody being 85% helpful or even 56% helpful than zero. There's a huge difference and a huge drop off. And our fire must be trained upon verbally, ideologically, philosophically, and politically on people who are rowing the opposite direction. And that's all the Trump crowd in office. Like, period. Every Republican, I would argue, there may be some strategy to driving a wedge between Republicans and MAGA. You know, that has to work too, where Democrats have a responsibility to be almost overtly appreciative of any Republican that isn't, be it Langford or even Thune in their fealty to Trump. Anybody who varies from that should get enormous applause the second they do it. So they have to make a choice. They can either go, oh shit, Democrats are clapping and I'm going to get in trouble, or this is my way towards the purple votes where one day I might be president. And they want to think that will peel them away from Trump, and that's valuable. That will save lives. That will save the economy. That kind of behavior. I don't need any of this, any purity tests, especially right now. We didn't need it before. It didn't help, and we don't need it now.
Let's hope sooner than later. Well, look, brother,
yes.
I actually have a call in 3 minutes.
Understood. You're a very busy guy.
Brother. I love being on your show. Everybody, just a little remove.
There you go.
Orange stains.
Yep. That's right.
Hey, I appreciate you, brother. I appreciate your audience. And thank you to anybody out there who wants to support my campaign. I can assure you that if I get to Washington, D.C., I'm going to actually push legislation. We've got a lot of people that are in Washington, D.C. that have been there for decades and they've never pushed and passed a single bill. My focus is going to be bringing funding back to my state. My focus is going to be pushing legislation that's going to help everybody in this country. Remember, the reason why you should support a candidate running in North Carolina is because I will be voting on bills that basically affect every single
nationwide
American in this country. That's right. So that's why this is important. And if you think that I'm somebody that has a voice that you like to hear, then by all means, help get me there.
We love you, brother, and there's nobody I worry about being true blue less than you. So your dedication is inspiring. We appreciate you, and thanks for coming on the show as well. I will see you next week. Have a great call, and we'll send everybody to your link and make sure that they do. So, all right, cheers. All right, absolutely. Chat room, we're going to hop in real quick, and I'm going to bring in Philip Ittner in just a moment. He'll be joining us. As I put him in here, the important thing, and again, it's Ojeda for NC.com, I believe is the proper one there. Let me go to this one real quick, and I'm going to put our dear friend Philip Ittner in on this joint. And as soon as he's ready to go, we'll bring him up. There he is, ladies and gentlemen. Philip Ittner joining us from Kyiv. How are you, brother? Good to see you. Obviously, nothing for us to talk about in the news. It's just been kind of dry over here lately. There's whatever low res sarcasm or verbal irony I can use to point to this. But last night I got to say, your take on, I don't know if you saw any of what he said. Your thoughts, if any, on Trump's speech last night or anything he said about Ukraine, but it was the same shit. I don't see any movement.
No, I don't know
Yeah.
that. You know,
Hmm.
the hope that the mineral deal can be rehabilitated, I don't know. There's some, talk here on this side of the Atlantic that it might happen.
Right.
Yeah, the upsetting news today, just within the last few hours, is that the U.S. is cutting off all intelligence sharing, which is going
Hmm.
to make things like targeting and well, just generally, just being aware of what the Russians are up to and how to
Right.
attack them. That's going to get more difficult. It's not going to be impossible, but it's
Right.
going to get more difficult. Yeah, and he just all sorts of
Hmm.
insanity. I mean, JD Vance's statement about a potential British-French fighting force has pissed off a lot of our allies, most notably the Brits.
Hmm.
Um, who he apparently he said when he was talking about the peacekeeping group, oh yeah, what some weird old some forgettable nations that haven't won a battle in 30 years or haven't fought a war in 30 years, and the Brits, both the Brits and the French, who are going to be the
Right.
proposed main elements of the peacekeeping, obviously took umbrage of that. The Brits particularly, because they were like, hey, we just went through a bunch of wars with you guys. We
Yeah.
lost over 600 of our men fighting
Right.
beside you.
Alongside you in
And now,
Afghanistan and Iraq. Right.
yeah, and so now you're going to say that we're incompetent as a fighting force and couldn't do peacekeeping? Just another win. Just another win
Hmm.
for, just the Trump administration just ruining all relations with our European allies, and we're getting to the point where it's I mean we're not getting to the point. I think we're already at the point where our
Yeah.
European allies are just like, well, we can't trust you.
Right.
So yeah, everything
Well,
they really
and
are
again, they can
literally
trust
doing Moscow's
Americans.
bidding.
Yeah, they can trust Americans. They can't trust this administration. And I think that's an important distinction that we also have a responsibility to make in terms of how we talk about this. Because, again, what is it? 65% plus of Americans believe that we should continue to support Ukraine, have been supportive of it.
Mm-hmm.
It is Trump's appeal directly to his absurd base. There was a point where last night where he goes, we've been supplying, support to Ukraine,
Oh yeah.
and there was applause from Democrats. That was the one time they applauded and they stood up. And there was one of the, I guess, I don't know if he was a congressman in the House on the Republican side, was like, the one time they stood up was for another country,
For
whatever. Like,
another
no,
million. Yeah.
technically speaking, they remain seated because they do not believe what he is doing is going to benefit our country. They're not going to stand up for the destruction of America. So piss off. Like, it's just cartoonish. Meanwhile,
Yeah.
this is it's seeming to like stick out more, that he seems to be just defending Putin specifically in a more ham-handed way than he ever has.
Well, he's made no demands on Putin. He's
Right.
making plenty of demands on Zelensky. He's
Right.
applying a hell of a lot of pressure on Ukraine, but he's not
Right.
asking anything of Russia or of Putin, which,
Right.
obviously should, it should raise alarm, bells all over the
Mhm.
place. I mean, to correct myself slightly there with I think Europeans know that the American people, that there's a lot, and certainly I've spoken to a lot of Ukrainians who understand like the American people.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, sadly, the damage that he is doing with terms of the various bodies of our government and our
Mhm.
foreign policy and our cooperation and our partnerships, that is increasingly getting frayed to the point of rupturing. The actual government, the U.S. government, is not just the executive branch, but our armed forces, our intelligence services, our
Right.
security services. Our allies don't know what to do because they can't be trusted. And the
Right.
idea that Article 5 is now, it's widely accepted in Europe that Article 5, the founding, the most important part of the NATO agreement, the
Mm-hmm.
relationship, the partnership that will come to their aid if they get attacked. I don't think there's a single European nation that thinks under the Trump administration that if they tried to initiate Article 5, that America would come in. I mean, I've even heard from some Ukrainian officials saying, we don't think you're just abandoning Ukraine. We think that you are cozying up to Putin. You're not only just
Yeah.
betraying
Well,
what you're doing to us.
and
You're
I would
taking the
argue
other
there's
side.
no we. There's no we in this because again, Trump ran on ending the war in 24 hours because he knew just what he would say to both sides. He ran on this Santa Claus bullshit and that he would solve it right away. He didn't run on, don't worry, I'll give Putin what he wants and he'll just keep the party took and the ICC will never be able to get him. Like that wasn't what he ran on. That's and yet that's what he's governing on. That's what he's doing right now. And so the United States, the voter, even the Republicans that voted for him and I guess the MAGA faithful just think Ukraine's a plot anyways, but whatever. But the vast majority of Republicans or the independents that may have shifted this way did not vote for him to give Russia the edge. They voted because he said, as the deal maker, he could stop it cold in 24 hours. And and his thing, like, I just want the deaths to stop, that bullshit, which is absurd, because you would never say what you said about clearing Gaza out and turning it into a resort for the people of the world if you worried about ancillary deaths from civilians, because that's just nuts. But he didn't run on that. The U.S. citizens didn't vote for that. Specifically, they voted, I would argue, they'd be stupid not to think that's what he was up to. That's what I was saying all along. But that's not what he was selling to the people, certainly. And in this particular instance, my question is how does Russia make a deal with Donald Trump, even with all the stuff that they're promising him, that Ukraine signs up for and Europe doesn't put in, peacekeepers in spite of the whatever deal Trump tries to broker, because it isn't his deal to broker. France has tried to do it. China at one point had a deal, right? They were trying to broker it. The Biden administration did, a couple of different forays into it, although I don't think they believe that, Russia were fair players in this. But it's not his. Neither of these countries are his. They're not. Trump isn't talking about turning, maybe Greenland is the 51st state before Canada, but certainly not fucking Ukraine. Right. So how is he supposed to make a deal without both sides acquiescing to it and the rest of the world not having a say, especially if he has no leverage because, OK, we're not giving him anything. Well, then, OK, if you got no leverage, what are you going to give us something back? What happens if Ukraine manages to move on without it? What if the European intel system, which is extraordinary, together is enough to make up for the gap? What if Europe's munitions, they go, hey, you know what? We could do 2% to 5% towards NATO, but our security is happening on Ukrainian land right now. It's better for us to just put more of our material stuff. We don't need tanks. They're not going to invade Germany anytime soon. So maybe we put more of those there. Maybe France goes, there's no fucking way, right? Then what? Then the U.S. is completely useless in the conversation, right?
Yeah, I mean, see, that's the thing is that Trump may have actually positioned himself so that America has no leverage,
right?
Because if the Europeans can indeed step up, and I think they're going to do their damnedest to do that, starting with they're going to seize that money. The Europeans are going to seize the 300 or 250 billion. That are held in Zurich and in the Bank of England. I'm confident that they're going to do that. That the Europeans are going to grab that money, and because it has been a shock to their system. They're like, oh shit, it's down to us. We've got to do this. So they're going to. I think they're going to steal. They're going to take. Well, steal. I don't care if it's steal.
Right.
They're going to take that money. Because Bill Browder made a very good point about this. He said, you either lose that money now, or you use it and pull it out of the banks and use it to support Ukraine's defense now, or eventually when the sanctions are lifted, you're going to lose that money anyhow, because the first thing the oligarchs and the government, the government holdings the Russians will do is take everything back and bring it within Russia's borders. So you're going to lose it one way or the other. You might as well do it in defense of Western, society, so that you can continue your banking. But also the other thing that, and I've seen
also
a lot
sue
of
us, like at a certain point, like Europe's got to be like, what do you? Okay, sue us with what? The rest of your fucking country that doesn't have a functioning system, anyways. Like, how's Russia going to manage?
Right, and when your central government in Moscow, the center of gravity that is Vladimir Putin is suddenly taken out because he loses this war, and he is. I mean, even if he doesn't quote unquote lose, but even Putin's screwed no matter what. This has been disastrous, this war for him. The only thing he could maybe slink away with is saying, "I helped defeat NATO and destroy NATO," but that was really more what he did to us with getting Trump put into the White House. The other thing I'm anticipating, though, is they can't match the United States when it comes to quantity, but what they could do is change capacity. So, like, the Germans are already starting to say that they're going to be giving Taurus cruise missiles, which has been a big deal. If the incoming chancellor, this new chancellor coming into Berlin, deviates from Schultz and actually does start sending the Taurus, which apparently they're going to do. They've already made announcements that they're going to do it. They could do things like that. They could change all sorts of different restrictions that they've had on the Ukrainians prior to this. Just lift them. Be like, you want to shoot, you want to fire into Ekaterinburg, go for it. Go for it. Go right ahead. Lift every single restriction that the West has put on Ukraine and give them new abilities to as I say, cruise missiles would be a big deal if they started giving more cruise missiles, I should say. So it may not be, they can't match America in quantity, but the Europeans can match in capacity and ability, and then they can also match in terms of financial support, which will allow Ukraine to buy weapons. And then what happens when they turn around to America? And Americans will not like this, I do not think, the Republicans especially, and the MAGA crowd, because what happens if they turn around to Trump and go, "Don't let the door hit you on the way out," see ya, bye-bye. And you have no say about any of this anymore. You're gone. If you really want to leave. And then what happens?
Well, that's right. Exactly. So one of the things too we've been talking about for a long time is that in the initial start of this war, one of the reasons why people believed that Russia was going to run away with it was because the second most powerful military in the world, and from a classical military sense, there's reason to believe they would have a lot of troops, a lot of tanks, a lot of artillery, a lot of this stuff. And then we see this whole thing over the last couple of years transition into a drone war, to the point where Ukraine hit a refinery just yesterday. In Rosneft. Let me show you this real quick, and I'll and this is kind of why I want to talk about this.
Becoming almost a weekly, or even several times a week.
It's like every 3 days, right? Yeah, but I mean, there's hits all the time. Every 3 days, they're hitting some major, either an ammo depot or a train or something. But even further into the country, at least every 3 weeks, they're hitting some major refinery or building inside Russia. Never mind the fact that there are obviously people within the country who are setting their own fires and blowing stuff up on their own, and that's not going to stop no matter what the deal is. The idea, Russia's not going to give back the kids it stole. It's not going to unrape the women they murdered and put in a mass grave in Bucha anytime soon. And a lot of people are going to carry those grudges for a long fucking time. And Trump just has no capacity to understand that, because he's completely transactional in everything he does in his life, and nothing has any meaning except his own financial well-being or something. But the point is that these Ukrainian drones hit this. There is a word that, where is it? Yeah, here it is. Ukraine to expand their drone production to 2,000 per month for strikes on Russia. That is like, and they're not talking about the little ones. They're already at that capacity for the little like grenade ones. They're talking about these. They're talking about the ones that are far more advanced than the Shahed stuff that Russia is using from Iran. Russia's not making their capacity. Like the irony, this is the key weapon in this war right now is drones. Russia is not producing their own. They don't have any worth a goddamn. They certainly don't have anything close to the U.S. Reaper drone or anything like that. If there's anything close to it, it's what the Biden administration shared as far as technology with Ukraine in the last 2 years to get them kind of on the lower tier of this and provide them with, the materials that Russia or that Europe could supply to them to make these things fairly quickly. They're not complicated. And so right about the time when Trump's like, we're going to cut all the money train is stopping, where America's not going to back anymore. Well, guess what? Over that period of time, war has gotten a lot cheaper, especially on this kind of massive scale. And Russia has not adapted. They have not adapted to this new scheme entirely. They definitely have their own drones, but like not, they're still using the meat waves methodology, and that's not going to change anytime soon, right?
Well, the other thing about it is also, I mean, one of the criticisms of those who want Ukraine to basically give up is that, I mean, and we even saw J.D. Vance saying it last week in the Oval, was this whole thing like, you don't have the manpower. You don't have the manpower. Those drones are unmanned. So you're not losing men. You're not losing men. All you're doing, it's a bunch of drone operators, these guys who are sitting using, whatever, technology to kind of direct these drones. They're not at risk of being in the front line. They're not going to lose it. Even if they lose the drone, they're not going to lose the people. So, Ukraine has survivability. Their soldiers are going, can live to fight another day. Even if we're not talking about the drones, even like on the battlefield, now that they're using NATO weapon, infantry fighting vehicles and stuff, those things are built to save lives. Those things are built so that in a democracy, you want to keep your soldiers alive because you don't want public opinion souring on the war. So you build your fighting vehicles, you build, everything is meant so that your soldiers survive because you don't want that death toll. Russia has no problem with that. Russia has, first off, they've got more men than, they believe that they have more men than, it's a resource that's near inexhaustible, but also their culture is such that it's like, well, you die for the motherland. That's you, the individual, not so important. And oh, by the way, we're a dictatorship. So if anybody, goes out in the street to protest, we'll just put it down. Ukraine doesn't have the problem with, their soldiers are surviving. We're not losing soldiers. I mean, obviously they are, but not at the level the Russians are. So it just, the attitude that the Trump administration has used and has by extension got the MAGA crowd regurgitating time and time again is that you're going to lose this war. You can't win this war. Ukraine can't win. Ukraine can't win. Ukraine can't win. So why not stop? Give up. Finish. Stop. You can't win. You cannot win.
It's a Marjorie Taylor Greene talking point from fucking 3 years ago.
Yeah.
That's the biggest issue is that now they can. That's the weird part. Okay, so there might have been a case where without the United States and possibly without Europe, the Ukrainians would have been overrun in a matter of days. Well, I would argue that about 8 months past the end, the beginning of the war, that ceased to become the reality because the Russians had been pushed back and were largely holding areas they had already had, and the Ukrainians were already on a path to building up their own munitions and building up their own tactics. Now that they've reached a point where they're producing drones and they've got access to artillery and grenades and other stuff like that on a human-to-human level, since Russia is still committed to this meat wave attitude, the Ukrainians have already beat that system. That tactic is it will never be enough. The Russians, maybe in the fucking 40s, they had enough young men to throw at this thing forever. And that I would argue is where Trump's weird thing about all these beautiful young people are dying on the Russian side and Ukraine. Like, he brings this up. Okay, why is he bringing this up? And it's not because the Ukrainians are going, we don't give a shit, we're going to keep throwing soldiers at this, because that's not how they're fighting this war. They aren't. As a matter of fact, Ukrainian deaths have gone down precipitously since they shifted to this like drone and distance tactic and artillery and that kind of stuff. But the Russians haven't. The Russians they're still using these, runs, this idea like a bullet only stops when it hits a human body, that whole thing of Trump. That's stuff he's saying to Putin. That's stuff that they're conversing with. That's their, if you look at who he's really trying to manipulate, it ain't working on Zelensky. It's not working on the international community. But the idea is who they're actually talking to if they're just talking this shit. They're talking to Russia. They're talking to, you're killing off your young men. That's what's happening. You know it's happening. That's exactly what's happening. Ukrainians don't have this kind of problem. The Russians that haven't fled are being forced into this. You got North Korean people dying because the Russians don't have enough people, right? That's who he's talking to. That's his tactic. You talk about audience of one when people are on Fox trying to manipulate Trump. This seems to be what Trump is trying to do. He's trying to kiss up to Putin and talk him off this ledge like, hey, man, you're losing, thousands a week. Well, who is? Who's losing thousands a week? It isn't the Ukrainians. They're losing hundreds, no question. But it's the Russians that are losing thousands a week, tens of thousands in some cases, depending on how bad the week is. So,
and it also,
I think that's what he's talking to.
Well, and there's also, he's throwing around millions of people have died. Millions of people have not died.
Right.
It is tragic. Lots of people are dying, but I find it interesting that he uses the millions have died, theme, this motto of his, because he wants to spread doom and gloom. He wants to spread Ukraine cannot win. Millions are dying. You're playing with World War III. Everybody be afraid. And the Ukrainians' response is, we live with fear every day. We have been living with fear every day for 3 years, if not, a decade. Fear doesn't dictate our actions. And for Trump, I don't think he understands that about Ukrainians, that they're not,
definitely not.
It's like, we're
definitely not.
Yes, we are traumatized. Yes, we are dealing with, very difficult things, and nobody is exactly, feeling great about any of this. God knows.
Yeah.
They all want this war to end, but they're not going to be ruled by fear. And Donald Trump's primary approach on this is everybody's got to be scared. Everybody's got to be despondent. Everybody's got to think that this whole thing is absolutely disastrous and, will only lead to more and more suffering.
Right.
Not necessarily untrue, but again, not the main motivator for Ukrainians. Ukrainians are motivated by the idea of, we have got to get to a place where we finish this war and they don't come back tomorrow. Or,
well, do you think it's working, or do you think this is another situation where Trump is a one-trick pony? That it worked on, he scared people about the border with people from insane asylums coming over here and murdering all the Laken Rileys in the country, and they're just coming for our, where are the white women at defensive posture. That it worked scaring people about the border, and that he thinks got him elected. So maybe if I just, here I'm the Messiah, I'm going to fix everything, run as Santa Claus, and the alternative to me is not a slightly less favorable version of things, or it's something you would disagree with politically, but something that's incredibly dangerous. It's the end of the world, right? And so this, this seems to be his single strategy.
I think he's talking to the MAGA crowd there, because he sure as hell is not talking to the Ukrainians. And I don't think in this instance he's talking to the Russians either, because the Russians aren't afraid. They'll keep going as long as they possibly can, especially Putin, because he's caught in this catch-22 of he can't demobilize. What are his soldiers going to return to? Fuck all. So he'll have a large disgruntled, armed, militarized section of his population that'll be going back to going back to their villages where there are no jobs. So he can't demobilize. He's got Trump isn't talking to him either when it comes to this doom and gloom stuff. He's talking to his MAGA crowd. He's trying to terrify his MAGA crowd so that they get behind the whole idea of betraying Ukraine. They've been laying the groundwork for that on a number of different fronts. But most Americans, I think you're right. The 65%, I'm not surprised by that at all, that still want to support Ukraine. But he's got to get his rabid base out there, and one of the best way he gets his rabid base out, whether it's immigration, you're right, or whether or not it's this war, it's fear. It's always fear with these people.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really, I think there's angry. A weirdness. Yeah, there's a weirdness to the Israel-Gaza setup, where it's the one area where he seems to think it will just run magically and smoothly. You know what I mean? Like, there's like, of all the things to think, like, to talk flippantly about, you could argue that since the Ukraine war is new and only a few years old, that one day this will all be over and there'll be great cities built in the eastern, the eastern part of Ukraine once again, and the Russian people will flourish, and so will the Ukrainians, and together, blah, kumbaya, right? You could argue, because it hasn't been going on for very long, that maybe you could get back to at least a stasis sooner, and then maybe there's some adults in the room and it grows into more European thing. Hey, look at the Germans and the French and the English and the Spanish. God knows they hated each other, for a very long time, and they're okay, right? But when it comes to Israel and Gaza and the Arab nations and fucking Egypt and Iran and all this stuff, Trump seems to speak flippantly about this. He's like, well, we'll just move all of them out. We're going to build a nice resort for them in another country, whatever that country fucking is. It ain't going to be Jordan. It ain't going to be Egypt. It's not going to be one of the ones that's nearby, because they would just stage another attack, of course. Like, if you're talking about Hamas and stuff, you're going to move Hamas next door. Like, get the fuck out of here. But he seems to talk about it in those terms.
You're going to further destabilize Jordan or Egypt. I mean, I've been to both Jordan and Egypt. They are on a knife's edge with their population. So, yeah.
And yet he speaks about it. He speaks about Ukraine like, oh my God, the deaths, millions and millions and millions, right? And he doesn't talk about, like, Gaza that way. He's like, he wants it to be, and maybe it's because, quite frankly, maggots, when we're talking about the death of white people in Europe, maybe that's what they're upset about. They don't like Russians and Ukrainians killing each other because they're both groups of white people. They don't view Jews as white necessarily, even though the pro-Palestinian, the pro-Hamas folks clearly think all the Jews in Israel are white and therefore it's colony, blah, blah, blah. But MAGA does not agree, and maybe doesn't give a rat fuck about, ultimately the only reason Israel exists for the evangelical crowd is so that Jesus can come back and all the Jews will have their heads cut off, right? And they believe, and this is the current state of evangelical pastors right now, that the Mahdi, the great leader of the Islamic world that's coming and may be here already, and that the caliphate of ISIS was built on with their black flags, because he'll come riding a white horse carrying a black flag, that they're trying to, gin up and push forward, that guy is the Antichrist who has to show up first, kill all the Jews that are earthbound, whatever the fuck that means, and then Jesus will show up and kill them in spirit or some nonsense. But that's the trend right now, because I guess they're like the dog that caught the car when it comes to Trump, and they can't believe that his declarations that he is the great peacemaker sounds exactly like what the Antichrist would say. So they got to punt it the other fucking direction and start to like, no, he's not the Antichrist. This dude's the Antichrist. I got to say, like, the way he talks about it, the way he talks about Gaza and Israel, like with a shrug, and his fixation on Ukraine and Russia, it sounds like Elon Musk's white supremacy shit whispering in his ear that May Musk doesn't like white Europeans killing each other. And we should, any disagreements we have should be settled, in the courts after the strong people survive and the weak are wiped out.
It's
It's
deeply
fucking
cynical.
Gross. It's
Yeah, it
really
really
cynical.
Yeah,
and I don't know, people are, I personally believe, and I have for quite some time, that they're still dragging about apartheid, that they're still pissed that they lost their fortune
with the South
when apartheid
Africans.
went away. Yeah, and that May and her husband, still have a grudge against the United States and the left in the United States that they perceive as being behind it. That the fucking We Are the World and the arts and Hollywood and all this stuff, that all this play about Hollywood being full of pedophiles and all this kind of shit, even though every time they point to somebody, they're like, see, we'll show you the terrible person. It's either somebody, Diddy's the closest, Sean Combs, because he's in music, and he's a business partner of Elon Musk's. But Epstein was in finance. Trump is in real estate. Elon Musk is, in technology and hanging out with guys. It's not Hollywood. Hollywood rejected a lot of these assholes a long time ago. They end up on reality shows at best, but they're not part of the arts community really to speak of.
No, they're up north in Silicon Valley. They're in Palo Alto.
That's right. That's
they're
right.
Not in Hollywood.
Or they're in DC, or they're in New York in the finance sector, right? Or they're in insurance or whatever the shit, or in Texas oil guys, or whatever that fucking, the Lex Wessler or whatever, the guy who, funded Epstein for a long time, was in did makeup and shit like that and clothing. He was he owned clothing stores. I forget which chain it was for a long time or whatever, but that's the world they're actually in, which is they're not necessarily the people who are the most public. Right? Very seldom do you find somebody who's really in the public as an artist who's engaged in any kind of sketchy shit, because one of the things that makes you want to be, I suppose, rich in other ways that doesn't show your face is so you can engage in the sketchy shit you like, right? There's a reason why these people lurk behind the scenes and why Trump drew undue attention to a bunch of these assholes. Right. So here's what and I want to remind everybody, by the way, while we're mid hour, that Phil has a show called On the Edge every Sunday. Please check it out and go to his YouTube channel and subscribe there. A rising tide lifts all boats when it comes to information. I truly believe there's no such thing as trickle down economics, but there is, a rising tide in voices, especially around the importance of Ukraine as a democracy, the importance of Ukraine as a stable country in Europe, and and as a stopgap against the Russian ideals of might makes right, their absolutely grotesque financial dealings, and their belief about race and superiority. Like, you're going to talk about being on the side of racists, being on the side of supremacists of any side, of any type. The Russian oligarchical crowd that Putin is a part of believes very clearly that whites are superior to everybody else should be subjugated. And then there are certain, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others in terms of European whites. And the Russians are at the top of this. The Han Chinese, as a people, I don't think believe the same thing, but their leadership absolutely do. And the CCP is completely made up of one particular group of Chinese people from one particular province and one particular strain of human beings. And they view all the other Chinese people in there as expendable serfs to be broomed at an appropriate time once their backs are broken. And so there is a unique, and I would argue that the Islamists that took over Iran and the Khomeini crowd believe that they are racially superior to the rest of the Arabs. They've talked about this for a long time, that they're the dumb kind of North African Arabs that are the cheap, expendable, brownish looking ones. And they're the higher cultures, the ones who invented algebra. Those are the ones who lay claim to that, even though it's not true of that crowd. It's largely the Persians, and they were further east even than that. But still, there's an alignment between these groups. Elon Musk is one of these fuckers. Trump given half a second, if you dig down deep at all, and it's really fucking shallow, actually. 3 sentences in, he'll start telling you how fast racehorses produce fast racehorses, and his uncle was at MIT, so that automatically makes him smart, regardless of how fried his fucking brain is. There is if people are worried about like white supremacy, it ain't run amok in the United States. That's largely a distraction by most measures. But it is really gaining steam in Russia and the AfD and Elon Musk's, support of them. That's largely based on, well, the Nazis did some good things. The bad things weren't what they did. What it was that they got caught too fast, right? That was the issue. They were too loud about it, or they let people complain, right? Seriously.
Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah, no, I know. It's insane. It's you dig into Musk's history, his family history. I mean, you look at and I know the sins of the father shouldn't be transferred to the son, but Fred Trump, is what he gets caught at a KKK rally, for God's sakes. I mean,
right.
The
well, and again, it's not the sins of it. It's that's where we are. It's not the sin. I don't think they should go to jail for the shit that their dad went to or your grandfather went to a fucking KKK rally. Therefore, you should go to jail for being a white supremacist sympathizer or something. But if you're like, Mike, I didn't always agree with my grandpa, but on that, he really nailed it. You're like, okay, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anybody's guilty for what their parents did. But if they're not distancing themselves from what their parents did, or they're openly agreeing with it, or their mom is on fucking Fox News going, yes, my with their Dutch accent, defending her son's, slapdash approach to, the poor and food programs, that should read. I don't give a shit, what other people did. But if you're in agreement with it and you're like, yeah, mom knows me better than anybody else, you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
That's where my concern lies. And with Trump, I got to say, it's not the money anymore. And maybe it's just you leave with who you dance with who brought you to the dance, and you leave what is it? You leave with the one who brung you. That explains his defensiveness about Russia, right? That maybe that's enough.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, I think on a very surface level, and stuff that we know in public, I mean, he clearly has an affinity for Putin. He clearly likes Putin. I mean, the fact that in the Oval, he said, Putin, we went through all that stuff together. It's like,
oh
I'm
my God.
Sorry, what?
Right.
So on the even in what's known in the public sphere, he clearly has an affinity for Putin. But of course, look, anybody who's studied this, even for a half a minute, there's the ties. There are too many Russians in his orbit. There are too many events and ties and links, and he is going to side with Putin. He's going to try and transition the entire country to realigning with Russia. I don't think the American people are going to go for it.
I think
they're going to be like, well, we've been enemies with Russia for how long? And two, once I think people start talking about the what Russia really is, we don't want to become that. That's not
exactly. Once the details come out, and again, the NRA gun rights issue in and of itself should just dismiss that. I mean, no, abortion. Do we want the same gun? And right. You can have an abortion in Russia. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I mean, you can. They have one. Yeah, 9th month they can kick the mom out a window, and they both, neither make it all the better. Like, it's gross. But here's what I will say: is it because, and this is the curious part, is it because he owes them and he really has an affinity, or is he such a dough-headed motherfucker that all those KGB tactics of ingratiation have just worked on him, that he's basically fucking hypnotized at this point, and for his own ego, he can't shake it, because the way he talks about him, it sounds like he was flim-flammed by Jim Jones. It sounds like Tulsi Gabbard talking about the cult she grew up in, that there is an emotional connection to it.
Yeah, I mean,
Did it work?
And it's not just Trump. He's surrounded himself and he's put into his cabinet people who are also like-minded, who have been infected with the Moscow mind worm, even if they're not directly connected to the Russians. The fact that like Tulsi Gabbard is like getting most of her information from RT at one point in her life, from Russia Today. You got to know that Hegseth is got all sorts of conspiracy theories, and Kash Patel. Part of what Russia's information warfare campaign is based on is this kind of idea of, there's a secret world that nobody knows about. And that just plays right into their paranoia and right into their fear and right into the resentment of the deep state, quote unquote. There's too much of this crap that has been brought into our government. And of course, the fish rots from the head down. Trump believes, I think Trump does genuinely believe the worldview that Moscow presents without questioning it, and it's infected him. And that's just
and
just
so
the
much
way
of it
he is.
seems,
I mean, that's before we even start talking about actual ties.
Right. So much of it seems personal, which is the part that stands out to me. Right. So much of it, it's not the same as like, look, that we're in a dangerous world, and sometimes you got to make friends with, his whole like sales pitch about you got to talk to the bad guys, and it's better to talk than not talk, and blah blah blah. That kind of like loose diplomacy stuff. That he got that from Reagan. That goes back to this mythological moment with Gorbachev, where they were arguing about something and they were drunk, and Reagan allegedly in this meeting said, "Hang on, everybody, 1 second. Let's start over. Mikhail, my name's Ron. Nice to meet you." Whatever. And they did this handshake across the table that allegedly led to the falling of the wall and the right, which is apocryphal and silly, and it's a myth and whatever. But Trump clearly believes it, or thought, that's how you're fucking magic, is that you're the dude who can like put his hand out and they're like, I have to shake hands with this dude or whatever. And I can make friends with even the most evil motherfucker in the world. And that, I'll be the guy who brought peace by being making an uncomfortable peace with somebody. What he doesn't recognize is that when in the true crime shit that he saw in the 80s, that the cops who pretended to be friends with a guy who brought the South Carolina shooter or whatever, the guy who shot up the church or whatever with the fucked up haircut, Dylan, what's his name? That they gave him, they gave him Burger King. Remember when they arrested him? He arrested him without an incident. And Cenk and all these dipshits at TYT and stuff make this big point about the cops gave him fucking Burger King, and they're like, okay, they gave him Burger King because he wasn't convicted yet. And if they go, you starved our client, this guy gets away with murder, even if he confesses because you starved him in this moment. Secondarily, he opened up. They gave him fucking Burger King. They didn't even need a trial. He confessed to everything. Yeah. They didn't necessarily, they vaguely knew it might have been him, but they didn't have him dead to rights in that situation quite yet. But they tricked him. He wanted to brag about this to somebody. They gave him and for the cost, they probably saved the taxpayer $7 million worth of trial expenses with a fucking bag of Burger King. And I feel like that's where we are with Trump and Putin. Putin saved himself billions of dollars of manipulation and all this other stuff with a fucking bag of Burger King with Trump. Like he just at some point when nobody liked Trump, he's like, I'll give you the money. You're good. I got you, buddy. And that,
right.
He got him on the cheap. Trump is a cheap fucking date.
Yep. Yeah. And now he's got him, he's compromised. He is 100% compromised by Russia. I don't know if we can even argue about this anymore.
Mm-mm.
If we can talk about what happened in the Oval. We could talk about everything that he's been saying for, however long. He's absolutely 100% compromised, which is
Right.
There have got to be guys in the U.S. intelligence who are aware of all of this. I mean, of course there are, but the problem is, like the old saying goes, if you're gonna take a shot at the king, you better not
You
miss.
best not miss.
You best not miss. You get one shot at this. I mean, look at the damage that the way they rolled out the Mueller report did to the cause of waking up Americans to the fact that Russia is inside of our politics. If you don't do it right, you can end up doing more damage than good. So I know there must be guys within the intelligence community who are aware of all of Trump's ties to. It's just when do you try and bring him to account?
Right.
And how?
Well, and again, what are you showing him? And what is it? So, we've talked a couple times about how there's a possibility that they're withholding certain information from him because they're worried that if they give him that information, if they pass it up the chain, like there are agents out there that are like, I could give this to my superiors, but if I do, it's just going to get into Trump's hands and it's going to end up in the Russians' hands. So that's not going to help us ultimately after all. Oh, thank you. So the question is there a time where that doesn't help, where Trump is unaware of the impact that's happening because it's being kept from him, because people aren't stupid, right? And they're like, I don't want to pass this up because it'll end up in Russia's hands. But if they don't give it to him, he doesn't know it exists. He doesn't know that the Russians are doing all this awful shit. He doesn't know that they're planning something terrible and that it's, I mean, again, he might, I suppose, get defensive about it. That would be the concern, right?
Yeah.
But
that he would he'd get, when you get him back him up against the wall, he's going to be more dangerous.
Right.
And
or he just gets defensive and doesn't pass stuff along. We do have, I will say, as much as there's an issue with Trump and his lack of support for Ukraine and his absolute fealty to Vladimir Putin, there are a lot of Republicans in the Senate, especially, who seemed directly pissed about this. Lindsey Graham, who used to be, one of the Ukraine's best supporters, has backed off in some days. But in other ways, other senators, because of that, have stepped up. And those are the ones that people take maybe a little more seriously about this shit. Because Lindsey was always seen as this kind of like closeted gadfly who just shows up when it suits him and is trying to appear macho by being around war as cover for being gay. Like, that is the word on the street. Whether it's true or not is meaningless. But that's the general feeling about the dude. But there are other Republicans from Thune on down.
He always, and he always ties himself. I mean, the other thing about it, and I don't want to drone on about Lindsey Graham because fuck that guy. But, the other thing is he's always attaching himself to somebody stronger. He's a toady. He's what the term was, he's a toady. Yeah. He's a toady. He always has to have the bully that he can, like, he's the little yapping dog beside, what are we going to do today, Butch?
Spike.
What are we going to do today?
Yeah,
Butch?
right. Yeah, right.
Spike. Yeah. What are we going to do today? And now that he doesn't have, well, except for, Papa Trump, he doesn't have John McCain around anymore to be, kind of toadying up to. So, it's depressing to see him do it, but can't say I'm surprised.
Right. So one of the things too is that Hegseth has put this whole big like macho spin on everything because this is how they live, and it kind of relates to what you're talking about, where he's like, "We're ready for any war, Russia, China, anybody. We're ready for war," or whatever. Okay. First of all, if Biden had destroyed the military, then clearly it would be a while before you were. So either you're lying or you were lying then, or both, because you were ignorantly lying then and you're lying with information now. You're pretending to have information you didn't have, and now you're pretending you don't have information you do have. That would be the two lies that Hegg said I didn't think does. But the idea is that it's all based on this kind of machismo bullshit. Whereas if Lindsey Graham is chasing the clout bully in Donald Trump is chasing the clout bully in Vladimir Putin. And Hegseth and those guys are just, I mean, at some point, they're going to step on somebody's toes, whether it's Putin's or Trump's in the process. All right. Well, that's the tough part.
Yeah,
I got to say,
it's insane. It's the whole thing is insane. I mean, you look at Rubio. You look at the whole.
Oh my God, that was pathetic.
It's God.
Mm-hmm.
The depiction of him on Saturday Night Live, I thought was very, very funny. In their cold open.
Yeah, just kind of staring into the middle distance.
Staring, ni hablo inglés.
Inglés, right.
Yeah, no English. I mean, it's just so depressing to see the damage that he is doing as quickly as he's doing it. And I don't think anybody should be listening to James Carville, but Carville, if Carville has made one good point in the last few weeks, and I'm not behind this 100% because I think we can't wait to do resistance, but his point give them enough rope and they'll hang themselves. Right. I think is 100% true, but
I think he's right too. I agree.
Damage that will be done in the meantime.
Well, and I'll point out
Ukrainians can't wait. When it comes to this conflict, the Ukrainians can't wait for the Americans to let their these idiots in the
there's a bunch of
collapse.
There's a bunch. Okay, a couple of things. One is during the Bush administration post 9/11. It was obviously this big push to go to war in the Middle East across as many fronts as possible. Wesley Clark talks about the PNAC 7 countries falling like dominoes that they had presented to him and all that kind of stuff. And it was amazingly fast from 9/11, the sympathy following 9/11 to yellow cake and the rest of the world and freedom fries. And we don't have any European allies and we're going to go to war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Fuck you guys and blah, blah, blah. Like it was amazing how quickly Bush drove us off that fucking cliff and Cheney backseat driving the entire way. So the only difference is that Trump's difference here is largely performative and the removal of support instead of the invasive part of it. So I would argue that Bush was way worse in invading Iraq than Trump pulling back from Ukraine as far as distancing ourselves from the rest of the world and engaging in something that I would argue is criminal. That said, when it comes to Ukrainian stuff, we've talked already about how we may be just pricing ourselves out of the market where the U.S. realizes, okay, in modern warfare, we don't necessarily need you guys anymore. Thanks Joe Biden for the tip up. But once we got stabilized, they really can't fight us on an urban level. They're not going to take the country. It might be ugly, but it ain't going to be the elimination of our country the way he says that the minute you guys leave, we're fucked. That's not happening. The other thing, too, is that Trump, by moving this quickly and Europe filling in that gap, it takes away whatever power and leverage he has, and his whole magic deal maker negotiator storyline goes right out the fucking window. Gone. That's it. And I really do think that fits into that kind of Carville, give them enough rope to hang themselves, is that Zelensky pushing back in the White House, which I think was very smart on camera to show the world how petulant and shitty Trump and Vance were. But also this whole look, we're willing to make a deal about stuff, but we need security guarantees as part of it. We're ready to come to the table, which is, of course, that language is, isn't worth the paper it's printed on in a war situation because the other side has a say in it because they can open up a new front. They can cut your fucking power. They can bomb a Zaporizhzhia or they can bomb fucking Chernobyl again. The Russians don't seem to give a fuck. That part of it is always at play. So him coming forward and saying we should be able to meet about these things is very normal as part of the diplomacy. It doesn't mean they're giving up and it doesn't mean they're giving in as much as Trump might want to present it as such. The problem is that he can't bring Russia to the table at all. He hasn't done it yet. He can't. And if he eliminates, let's say, he eliminates our support for Ukraine, like they paused the aid right now. He can't get rid of it entirely because, again, The Congress has done it. They've already allocated it. That stuff is already. We've given them access to those things. He can't stop them unless they violate some sort of horrible agreement, and he can't make a case for that. So, and we're bouncing stuff through Europe anyway, so it's not my biggest concern. But let's say he removes those things. We don't have the intelligence from you guys, and we don't have this. Then why would we? Why are you our deal maker then? China didn't give us any of that shit, and their deal fell apart. Fuck off. You're not going to start arming Russia. You can't. Right? That's not going to happen. Like you'd have to take an act of Congress. It'd be bizarre, and it would never happen. We're not going to. Maybe the worst case scenario I can think of: Trump's White House through Tulsi Gabbard feeding intel to Russia that gives them the upper hand. Right? That would be the big scary part. What if we give them information about Ukraine's defenses, and they're able to do a horrible attack? Well, if they do, after Trump pulled back our support, and Russia makes these huge gains, then what? Then where's Trump's leveraged hand and his power to control Putin and all this stuff? Where's his name in the history books as the peacemaker? If you went, oh, you just removed your support for these guys and then they got killed. That's it, or there's a major attack.
And you know what amazes me as well is that the MAGA types have taken on this narrative about Zelensky being a dictator for life. Oh, he's not holding any elections, and so he's this illegal, illegitimate. He's a dictator. If anybody, I mean, if you have been watching Zelensky at all, and now currently as well, even after the humiliation in the Oval. And I mean, I wouldn't blame Zelensky if he said, I'm not going to negotiate with these people, and they're not taking good faith. But even today, he's been saying things like, if we can renew the mineral, the rare earth thing again, I will, it's not about me. It's about the country. He keeps reiterating this. And Trump has no concept of this.
No.
So these guys that are like, oh, Zelensky's a bad guy, and we got to get him out of there, and all the rest of it. All the talking points that have been fed to the right wing types, they just don't. They haven't been listening to Zelensky because Zelensky's exhausted, man. I mean, I've watched him over the last 3 years. You catch him in moments, and you can see he's just fried. He is fried, and who can blame him?
Right.
He's only human, for God's sakes. But he's repeatedly said that, I'll be happy to walk away. I'm going to go home. I'm going to go down to the Black Sea and, have a beer and, put my feet up, sort of thing. Like, I'm done. So that narrative doesn't work for
if they don't kill him afterwards too. The other thing is that the idea that he's going to have a target on his back for the rest of his life. Here's the issue that I think Trump is up against, and this is where the Carville thing is right on the money. I completely agree that, and this is why I'm saying I'm giving Democrats a long lead to Amy Klobuchar meeting with him or being part of the inauguration or whatever, like this kind of tiptoeing around is like, hey man, yeah, cool. I call it the Macron handshake. Anybody who wants to do the Macron handshake, it's going to work like a fucking charm because he can't blame them later when his shit fails. It's all on him. And the same thing, people were concerned that Zelensky and not being more thankful or whatever didn't do the Macron handshake. He tried it a couple of times. He was like, God bless Trump for being here to, when he started that stuff. That was clearly his attempt at it, but he's in a real war. It's hard to fake that shit when you're sitting across from, especially Vance, who's a complete scumbag, just an asshole. But let me show you let me show you where I think all this is leading in terms of these things coming together. Trump is going to delay his Canada-Mexico tariffs another month. He's punting again, according to Lutnick. They're going to just keep doing this. And he's fucking with the markets while they do it. The market went up a little bit. It's going to go down at the end of the month and then go up. And he and his buddies are going to make money off this shit. But there are a couple other things I want to show down here. The Supreme Court kicked back his USAID foreign aid freeze. He's $2 billion worth of work that was already completed or went out the door under Biden has to go out the door. Some of it is Ukraine money. Just saying, for the record. Yep. Also, Trump agency pulls 443 sites off market in real estate reversal. So Doge was putting up all these buildings for sale. They were going to end these leases or sell government buildings and put them on the market or whatever. And it would wreck the commercial real estate, industry in the United States, which is already on its heels because of COVID and nobody wanting to work in an office during this. And they just yanked him back. He is reversing all of these things. And even in the tariff thing last night, he goes, you're going to have to bear with me as these tariffs go into effect. And then on top of that, Wall Street banks say markets are flashing rising recession risk. They already know where this is going.
Yeah.
And he's going to reverse. I expect a similar freeze, the freeze on intel for Ukraine being lifted quietly in the background. He's going to say it, and then they're going to slowly start putting it back out because he's got no fucking leverage with Russia at all. So why let them have the upper hand in this situation, giving them even less reason to come to the table? Because if you just pants Ukraine, why would they ever? Why wouldn't they just keep fighting, right? Do you have to have some level of stick with Russia? And he's not. If that's gone, he doesn't have one. The other thing, too, is that Ukraine is playing ball, Russia is not. And that's going to become abundantly clear week after week as the deal, as it drags on. And it ain't going to be, eventually, even MAGA is going to realize that it isn't Zelensky that's dragging this process, right? It isn't Zelensky that's or the Ukrainians. They're the ones who were attacked. And that's going to start gaining steam because the way he's talking about this shit is so bizarre and so divorced from reality that at some point it's going to blow back on him, even if it's the point where he faces the reality dealing with Russia not willing to actually do any kind of deal where there's security guarantees at all, which is just an absurdity, right? That's just dumb. The Ukrainians would be idiotic
for Ukraine.
Yes. Yeah. It wouldn't even, it's beyond even like a line that they have. There is no deal if Russia can just break it because that's all Russia ever does. So it isn't a deal. It's not even that they couldn't even make the deal. It's not a deal. There's no deal there. What is status quo? But we give you something? Fuck off. It's weird. And I just don't expect anyone.
It's tantamount to surrender is really what he's asking.
Right. And eventually the people around him have to know this. All right. We're at the end of the hour. I appreciate Phil, you coming on. There's a lot of this, a lot of moving parts in this. On the Edge is Phil's show. Please check it out. Subscribe to his YouTube channel, and we will see you on Saturday on the radio show if you can join us. Please be safe, and we'll talk to you soon. All right. Let me get over here. Yeah, absolutely.
See you guys.
And there he goes, ladies and gentlemen. Wait, I've got do I have a little, I do. Focus button. There we go. Hi, chat room. Thank you guys so much, by the way, for watching today. And I know it's like on certain days, the amount of news around something and the lack of stability in it means that we're throwing a lot at you at once, and it's more scattershot in those circumstances, but it's reflective of the reality, I think. Anyways, I really appreciate you guys being with us. I think there is a point where, like the tariff stuff, like the reversal on these real estate things that Doge is kicking out, and like the aid that goes out, the reversal that they're making in a bunch of these situations, that there's a day coming where Trump will have a choice. He can reverse course or crash and burn. And it will be it is a problem of his own making. The question, and obviously the biggest fear is, will he realize that before it harms everyone else, right? That would be the biggest concern, I guess. I gotta say, I think the cushion between fa and faux is will be the big talking point. And we will discuss that on Saturday as best I can without accidentally saying fuck around and find out on the actual air. So anyways, I will see you guys later on this afternoon. I got to take off. We have pesticide people coming, which is terrible because we have fire ants. Isn't that fun? This is fun. Yeah. Because this is what I have to deal with. how life is. What are you gonna do? How you're trying to rationalize insanity? Nope, not at all. You couldn't anyways. But the biggest problem Trump has right now is the rationality of reality. He can't beat it. He wants to try. He wants to try and use the secret to get out of it. You know, he wants to believe his way through. But I got news for you. That's not how reality works. Reality bites, and it will bite you in the ass. And it's worse if you try to trick it. That's what he's doing. He thinks he can trick reality, and you can't. I will see you guys this afternoon. Take care of yourselves and take care of somebody else.
They just explode when they gaze upon Yosemite's computer board. Voila. Action replays in magnified fortune. Values. Values. Eurovision. To me, Corona means Italy.